Reactive training systems.
Well, I mean, maybe that's a good place as any to start. So, um, when we were having some conversations at the Sheffield Hotel about your training and stuff, your background seems to like weigh in heavily on your approach to training. Wanted to know if you wanted to say anything about that. Like, how does like your profession, education tie into powerlifting, and how do you kind of view powerlifting?
Yeah, so I studied maths at uni, and then off the back of that, I went into consulting, and then but in the same sort, I did like data analytics, and so that's currently what I've seen now, like that's our industry. So I tend to like fall the line of kind of how I think about programming or like how I approach my training, because like my thing with training, like I like tracking loads of variables, like obviously like planning things out, and also kind of have an idea of like see it as like a problem to solve, opposed to like I'm just kind of going into training. It's more so like it's the end goal is like let's say the total, how I break it down, let's see then from there it's like what do I need to hit using my training, like these little variables to get me to this number for each list, and that'll give me like the total I want. So I think with that, it's just kind of how I approach powerlifting. And also like it's probably just solved that you just like aimlessly doing it, and it kind of makes it more fun. So like I think with when things don't kind of go your way, it makes it more interesting. So like also when you have a bad meet, or like when you think you are having, I wouldn't necessarily be things to do before. So like with even like performance checking, like although strength I felt like I should have been a lot more, and obviously didn't get that. Like, cool, what do I need to do that with my training? So then you go, okay, cool. Let's look at like my past year, 2, 3 years of training history. What are the general trends? Are there any patterns I can see here? Like, is it showing up? Is the same pattern showing up here? But I'm kind of missing it because like sometimes you aren't objective because of like you want a certain result. So like you might know, oh, this didn't move that great last week. Well, it'll be fine. I'll hit it on the day. It's okay. But it's like, okay, cool. Am I like missing out on like the obvious things here? So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're in good company around here. Like, we definitely all kind of fall in the training nerd space, and I really enjoy the problem solving side of it. That's what keeps me coming back to self-coaching and whatnot as well. Is it's just interesting to try to untangle the knot, make sense of it all, and
Yeah,
find out how to control it.
Especially since there are so many variables you could track in training, and that jump of when you first start training, like, okay, there are obviously going to be trends here. There's obviously going to be patterns and levers to pull, and then navigating which ones make the biggest impact and which ones matter the most for you, which is also individualized. So you can look to others for inspiration, but you can never get away with copying exactly what they're doing, so it won't be fully applicable to you.
yeah, like it's
And having the background in data analytics is pretty cool.
Have either of you happened to read the book Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin? I read that years ago. Josh was a like chess prodigy, so he was really good at chess from a young age and really immersed himself into it. I forget what a lot of his accolades were, but he was a competitive chess player of like the highest level, right? And then he goes through his journey of like how he got involved in chess and how he learned about chess and how he studied all through his chess career. And then at some point, he walked away from chess and took up martial art. I believe it's called push hands. It's like the competitive branch of Tai Chi, and became a world champion at this as well. And then he was talking about like the parallels of learning between like learning something that's very cerebral like chess versus
yeah,
something that's more physical, and like how those things meet. Anyway, he
yeah,
talks about the same type of thing. Like it when he's talking about learning chess, he calls it's been a long time since I read it, but it's something like numbers to get numbers or something along those lines. And where he's like really deep diving into the different nuances of the different positions that you're in, and like exchanging this piece for that piece, but at a very deep level, and it kind of reminds me of where I end up with training, where I guess we all end up with training sometimes, which is like, I want to really understand what is going on here. What is it at the bottom that I'm playing around with? Like, what are these variables? Well,
Have you played chess like a lot growing up, or?
no, not a lot. Like, I know the basics, but that's it.
Because I went because I've played it, bad, I like it. Because you guys are yes, it's different, and I've seen it play like year 7, year 8. Well, it's like so we have like high school, and then we have college, and then we go uni. So year 7 to like year 7 is like year 11 is like when you're like in, I think it's like 11 to 16, and then so like 11, 12, like 11, 12, I played chess loads because obviously, but then back in what I tended to stop like around the 8 for the spend too much time. I just always play at lunch because it was super fun, but you get to learn about the openings and obviously, and then also like there's like a pattern to it. So like you have to kind of learn end games, the different like stages, and then like it becomes almost a thing of like you kind of have to study to kind of break like stuff like different tiers you're in. And so like a lot of it becomes like just study. So like how we kind of approach training with how you approach like chess. So like then you have to have coaches as well who like teach you, get you good at it, and then so you but yeah, so it is quite like interesting. But like to break like certain like tiers that you kind of have to like devote like countless hours to just like studying different patterns, and then so you can kind of recognize it. So then like, and then it's kind of like a cool where separates people like can you like now think creatively after these patterns have ended. But if you don't know like the patterns, you're not going to get very far.
Got to know the rules to break the rules.
Yeah, so like because it becomes just literally like pattern recognition, and then once like you're like in new positions, like who's like the most creative, and because they have like different styles as well, like for example Magnus Carlsen, you know, like everything the chess that is like this freestyle one where it's like this is just like in like odd position to start with. So like the future's really well because you like very creative, opposed to like
That's interesting. That's part of your background as well. So, like, to come from a background of playing chess and data analytics, what other kind of athletic pursuits did you have growing up?
just
Yeah,
because
but I
chess,
mean,
but like
you knew more than, like, you took it further than most people do. Most people know, like, the knight moves like this, the rook moves like that.
yeah,
Like, if you're talking about like openings and mid game and end game, like you know,
You have a passion for figuring things
Yeah.
out,
yeah, because like
not just participating in them, but figuring them out.
because like I think when I used to when I was doing it like this, because like I think what got me like super interested was like there's this like I think this fool's mate that someone did on me. It was all this stuff and you start to
Yeah.
learn like yeah, it's like different like
it's
yeah,
a
things you need
trap.
to know.
The competitive aspect. Someone beats you once, you're like,
No, especially when it's like you're not used to seeing it. It's like oh, it's like and then back then into like say yeah, so from I'm trying to think so like high school like year 11 to year 11 for us, and then we have colleges like the 2 years of people universities. I think year 9 to year 11 I think would be, and then did it as also in college a little bit, but then like in uni didn't really follow up with it. Wasn't too keen on it when I got to uni. I was like dabbling like other stuff, like tried Wing Chun for a little bit. I seen like Ip Man, so I tried that for like
yeah,
6 months.
great movie.
Yeah. So yeah, I wanted to try it, and then it was super cool. But then it's not what's the word, like it's not. You can't really apply it in terms of like actually trying to like use it with your mates. Because I think I stopped it after like 6 months. Because like, I think I was like, oh, I can do this and get pretty good. And I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. Like, let's see what you can do. So obviously, I was like in the stance, and I was like, and I was like, I've not actually learned how to like
the real world application.
yeah. So it was like, okay, cool. Yeah, probably not doing this. And then, well, tried judo as well for a little bit. Judo was pretty fun because it was like when I like the British champion, like he's teaching like classes at like sports for a bit for years.
It's interesting that your focus was generally on solo sports where you're accountable for yourself. It's kind of you against yourself, and it's you figuring out puzzles. Like judo, martial arts all around kind of puzzle solving on the same aspect as well.
Now rugby was like the team one. The only team one I did for year 9 year 12, and then I think I was in college, and then Blackpool I was kind of like and it just when you get to uni, like I think with like team sports and stuff, it just gets a bit like what's the word, like the vibe. I don't know, was it the vibe? But it's like it gets very like you have to kind of mesh with the team, and like it's not like there's like a whole different like culture of it, like outside just playing the like sport. Whereas I feel like I've seen college high school doesn't know any of that. It's just kind of like, do it, go to it, we'll see you're training with everybody, you kind of go on board. So you, with it, it's like, we go out together, all this stuff, and I see it. I'm like, I'm not doing any of that. I'm good. I'm like, I'm not jumping in any lakes. I am okay.
It's kind of like, I am strong. I'm good at the sport. That's what you should need.
Yeah, literally, like, because I had mates who I think he did in hockey. Obviously, he's like similar ways, like, he didn't get involved in anything, but he just gets alienated from the team. But it's really good, so, like, obviously, it's still, like, he does it. But it's just, like, he actually meshes with the team outside, like, the playing. Just doesn't. I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing that. Rather providing this somewhere else.
So, was it from rugby that you started powerlifting?
So, no, powerlifting was so I started powerlifting in uni, but it was off the back of doing boxing. I did that for I just try stuff just randomly, like I thought it's quite cool.
No, that's perfect. That's yeah.
I did a charity boxing match. It was, and off the back of that, I was going to do varsity within uni, and then obviously within to do varsity, like for a year, you have to like, train with a team for a team period of time. So I was like, oh, I haven't been training with a team. I'm doing it instead. Like, is it a Muay Thai gym, like kickboxing gym, like that wasn't associated with it, and obviously you have to do it with like within your food team. And then we started obviously training with these lot. But I also at the same time had started doing like strength sports in Sheffield, because I went to University of Sheffield at the time, so which is with Sheffield. And then so we had obviously doing strength sports. I think then we're like you're already like decently like all right. So when you try doing, yeah, sure, I'll give it a go. So, like literally next month after joining, I was like, I signed up for meet, and then did that. And I was like, okay. I just was just new world of people. I was like, what is this? I'm like, I think I benched like 110 at this time, and I was seeing like 140 benches. Like, what is this world? What is going on? And I was like, then like I started like looking on like up card like what's like numbers there on that morning. Weight classes on my age group. I'm like, oh my god, like where is this? Sitting there thinking like, what can I do like this next year? So I started planning for that. Like, well, like, what's my year gonna look like? What's it doing this? And then just kind of stuck with it since.
So that was motivating for you then to like look on open powerlifting and see what the possibilities were.
Who was it now? Like, he isn't powerlifting anymore, but it was like Nathan. When Salah was like the best junior at the time, I think we had. It was just 2019. So obviously I seen him and was like, oh my god, this is crazy. It was like I think, and we did about 6 rounds on it, from what I remember. I think at the time, I think my first total was like 512, and I was like, oh my god, this is huge gap. So, and then,
well, that's cool. Like, I mean, you've heard plenty of stories about like people who feel the opposite, right? Like they look at that and feel like overwhelmed by it almost. But I don't know. It's interesting. There's so much. If you don't mind my third party analysis here, like there's so much like similarity in these different things that you've done. Like someone once described, we were talking about boxing in particular, and he said boxing is like rock, paper, scissors with physical pain as the consequence for being wrong, right? And you kind of extend that analogy to all martial arts, right? And you know, it kind of goes back to it being a puzzle to solve. And like, that's why a lot of people get into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and like that, because it's a puzzle to solve and they enjoy that aspect of it. So it's interesting to see that and then like see the parallel and the things that you mentioned that were motivating to you out of powerlifting as well. You know, I wonder this about myself too, right? Like how much of it is finding a way to make it interesting, like make the problem interesting long term, you know? Like powerlifting is interesting because of this. To me, it's like I like the challenge of figuring the puzzle out. And if I could look into a crystal ball and know exactly what was needed, like have all the answers in front of me, that would be disappointing, you know? Like I would feel like something was missing.
You'd get quite bored. I'm the same way. Like I think when like things go too well for too long, it gets a bit like
complacent.
Like generally, I just get like a bit like, what's going on. Like, I think literally, because I think after 2020, 2021, I think I've done Junior Worlds and Junior Euros. I was like, oh, like, I think I got the highest total as of the AGB 5 to 74 at the time. What's the next goal to do? Like, I'm already doubling anyway. And I was planning I was going to do that for the next 6 months to like sack off powerlifting because I was like, oh, it's gone really wrong. Like, it's like nice. And then that's when I think that's got injured actually. I got an injury off at the end of that when I was playing my music. Like, interesting. Like, okay, something to kind of keep.
When I think about the sports that you've done, where the opponent's the variable to solve, powerlifting, you are the variable when you're self-coached to solve. And because you are always technically changing, the second you get too complacent, something happens, an injury or a really bad block, and you're like, okay, game on.
Yeah, like
Again.
it makes it like, I know you like you get like kind of activated. Like, okay, cool. Like, what's the answer to this? Like, you can have two reactions. You can either like see that and go, okay, cool, like I'm done, or you can kind of look at it and go, oh, this is kind of interesting. Yeah, I think I kind of look at it, what can I kind of do?
And you've always wanted to be self-coached then, as the one to solve your own variable.
I did, obviously initially, but I wouldn't be able to do it properly, like starting out, because I was just, because I had coaches for the first 3 years doing it, and then last 3 years, 4 has been just me. I think my last coach I had was Ben Pate.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so obviously, so it was like back when it was like 2021. And I think just from, obviously, my coach I had too, but I think him specifically, like, obviously his approach was like, tells you how things are, opposed to like trying to like, should look at things, but like, yeah, you get rid of stuff. And it's like, I think off the back of his approach, it's impacted obviously how I kind of approach things going forward, where it's like, I tend to be, even if like I have my, what I want to answer, like what I think it is, or what I'd like to do, like also,
Yeah.
So like it kind of allows me to kind of get good in a sense.
That makes sense. I mean, everybody needs mentors, whether they come in like different flavors, right? But having somebody that kind of coaches you early on, becoming a mentor, that makes a lot of sense. Who else would you say have been like mentors or influences on the way that you approach powerlifting training now?
I'm trying to think of like, it's like I look through a lot of people's stuff. Like obviously I've looked series. I think it kind of becomes a mesh of like everyone's kind of content or like ideas out. Because like I think with like obviously trying to learn the program, you have to kind of really program. Like so even like with like left orange before follow the code and it's like what's like how does someone else approach it, and obviously then how do you approach it? And I'd say like the Wilson was also really good in terms of like if you explain something really well, you'd summer. So like technique wise, well, I'd say like it's more so like a mixer of just the picky people. Like it'd be I'm see there's also a Bromley and like
Sure.
I'm prepared for this one. You just kind of
I mean, I relate to that very much too. Like so if you're always interested in this, then you end up consuming a lot of different things all the time, kind of lots of times, like in small ways, I'll go through phases where I get really intrigued by a certain approach or something, and we'll like deep dive into that. But yeah, like it's like always a trickle of just things around, and then like that becomes this background information that is just there. And when you're trying to solve a specific problem, it bubbles to the surface,
or you can like pull through some. Let's say I can't. And I watched this video like 2 years ago where this guy was like, oh, because A week and a B week, and like he had this like entire like of life and undulated base a certain way, and I'm like, cool, I could try that now. Because I've seen it before somewhere.
Yeah,
I think it's honestly, that's basically it. Or it just kind of pops it because you've seen a video there and like here, and it's like you might not use it initially, and they were just like all of a sudden.
Man, I had a class when I was in university, and it's like one of those classes that I wish that I could take again, because there was so much there that it just went over my head at the time. But one of the things that I remember, we were having to talk about creativity, and the position that they were teaching, and that I've kind of come to believe as well, is that like you have to have a certain amount of, they call it requisite variety, just a certain amount of background information about a big variety of things. Some of them may be completely like in a tangential field, that might not, like we're talking about powerlifting and powerlifting training, it might not be specifically that. Maybe it comes from strength and conditioning or a different idea about like I've seen people make parallels between the way that I develop training emerging strategies and agile management systems and software development as being like emerging types of systems, right? So like you develop these things and they're all kind of in your brain somewhere, and that becomes the fuel for whatever creative problem solving that you have to do. And that creative problem solving is super important. So, I mean, I don't know how you would seek to control that process other than just like be a curious person and gather information about things that you find interesting.
I've actually seen a post on like that exact example, like someone using like the agile framework and relating to parking, like it was in probably somewhere where I literally, that's all I've seen, like literally I've seen a post on this like very good. We've talked, I was like, oh, yeah, this is like, especially to like, I will do consulting work, I'm trying to see the big thing is like, oh, you have to bring me out like safe scale agile. I was like, it's a hilarious to see this really like,
So a bit more on that as well. So my brother is a software engineer and he's worked at all these, software companies for like 20 years or something. And it's all agile. It's been agile for a long time now, So he's kind of got a different view on it. And, he's pretty intimately familiar with some of the shortcomings of the process and is pretty willing to rant on those sometimes, which I can kind of look at that and be like, oh yeah, those are some weaknesses in my planning system too, right? Because it shares like some of these common features. So it's interesting to like get some criticism on like my training program from somebody who's not a lifter at all.
yeah, because like I think so. If obviously one of the pitfalls of yeah, some developers will do is like with kind of get something like in like blocks. So basically they have to like have like a UV or they get the out, and obviously like sometimes they have to do a lot of stuff in a very short time frame, and like obviously people who are kind of managing that don't quite understand the exactly what's going on. So like they just know, okay, cool, we need to get this in this certain amount of like weeks. How's it going? Get us this, and then kind of move on. Similar to like using our blocks. Like I guess you could say like maybe people expect too much progress in a block, and that's kind of the same thing. And they'll kind of push things too much for like, um, and then something breaks. But it's kind of, you did what you said, and it's like, now look at this mess. Yeah, I think I can understand like where they're kind of coming from. Because usually it's kind of someone. It's usually the product manager or project manager will be someone who's actually has the technical background. So they're like, oh, we can deliver this, deliver that. And it's like, in what time frame? Oh, we can just get more people. Ooh, you mean it's gonna work any faster?
It's the praise. 9 women cannot make a baby in 1 month.
Yeah. It's like that's
I work in project management. I know the exact mindset you are talking about.
yeah. Like that went through something like the framework as well. Like one of the care about that. So like it's kind of talk to like what's the approach is like it works, but it's also like you've got to apply it in a certain like way. And obviously the team has to kind of get bored because I know like a lot of like the super like technical guys would hate it. Like they just hate stand-up calls. They just hate the plan. They're like,
And to loop that into trainings, I know that you coach as well. If you have a team, if you have someone and they don't like what's going on, they're going to be a bad employee. They're going to be a bad athlete. If you give them something that they despise participating in, even if it gets the end result, it's going to be painful for everyone involved
yeah, because
by
like
the back and forth.
yeah, like 'cause I don't coach a lot of people, but typically like, we keep it like I kind of coach guys. I usually have like we talk quite a bit, so I kind of get an idea of like what they're kind of like. But sometimes obviously you might have something in there like they don't quite agree. Usually it's like attempts and like approaches, and it's like sometimes it's like, oh, like I can pull this, and like you can, but in training, like your grip gives out at its number. Like it's not adjusted yet. So like even if you can pull 400, it's like work on this stuff you don't want to do, and then like eventually it'll be fine. But it's like, why don't you hold me back up from doing what? I would be pull this stuff. It's just not yet. And it's like, what? Because I think looking at it, it's because obviously like I've done the same thing usually. So like I know where someone's head's at. There's like I've done all this silly stuff. Wasn't like I was a terrible client as well. Like when I like honestly, I did so much silly stuff when I started out. Like just looking back, I was like, oh, horrible. Like I was like, so I kind of anticipate when someone is like that. I'm like,
Were you the athlete that maxed out their attempts 2 weeks up from a meet?
oh, 100%.
Like, let me just test. Let me just test my strength. Let me see.
Yeah, literally my first year, like my first year national, I think I wanted to pull the national record of 375 at the time. And then I was like, I think I failed 270 in training, like more than 5 times. I just kept because it was like I was like, this should go on. What's going on? Because like it was going to like just fatigue kept a little bit. I didn't quite understand what was going on, but to be like, I've left this up. Like, why can't I match this? Like,
The chart says I should be able to do.
yeah, my ERM says this, why can't I do it? And I'm like, what? What's up? Yeah. Obviously, you hide it from your coach.
It's not the data. Yeah.
It's just you being an
It's
idiot.
not the data that's turning against you. It's your emotions and your wishes turning against yourself.
Yeah, honestly, man, it's funny. But yeah, that is handy. So also, like, I'll have an idea as well, like when something's like something off for him, because like I'll know the signs because I'm like, you're awfully like, you're very quiet lately. What's going on? Like, you seem too happy about something. Like you've gone up further, haven't you? But it's like,
But that's also a time where you learn a lot of lessons on programming for yourself. And getting into your training, I'd be curious on what lessons you learn from your lifts now. Because like the self-coach and making those mistakes, they sure teach you a lot.
and so like with like the self-coaching arc, should I say, like this arc, I'd like to split into two parts. So like the first, it's been like 3. Get really strong, get injured. Get really strong, get injured. And I was like, this isn't really working. And it was like, it was kind of a thing of being super fixated on like each block and then specific finger. But like, I mean, like making sure I just do the most I could, or trying to just like ramp things up too quickly in terms of like not being mindful, like wrestling or tonnage, like amount of sort of reps you're doing or less amount of sets you're doing. It's average intensity, like not you like super mindful of these things. Obviously, I'll track them, but like they'll be mostly like they're just nice things to know, but like not actually like use them in my decision making. And then obviously like off the back of that, it's pretty cool. Like kind of pay more attention to like what is the general trend of like, do I break after I push my volume, my whole set? Is it in specific rep range? Is it like a warm up loading something things? So they and then look in there, like okay, I kind of know this. So when I kind of the next half is like when I kind of reset, like I know I can manage this level of volume, these amount of sets across the week, and these amount of accessories. Let me just stick here because like even if like I might not progress as fast as I would like, I will be broken, and a broken Ade, a healthy Ade, can do all right as long as I can keep training. So I think just off like also looking at training of like planning it with where I would kind of like to go in terms of where I could be in like 2 years from now, opposed to where I'm like super fixated on now because like there's someone I want to be and like I need to do everything in my power to like get where I want to be. Also not thinking about like if I do this, like what if I blow my back out, blow my knee out, and I'm like now I'm to rehab the next year. But like, what if like let's say I just do this, where could I be 2 years from now? Even if like, and eventually if you keep progressing well, it won't be this thing of like you have to sort of do so much to beat somebody. You kind of just will be there. So kind of zooming out with training, also like having targets. So like the last year and a half, I kind of had everything like planned out of like what my meets would kind of be, what my numbers would be like each meet, also like what the block would be like. So each block has like a target and like how it all kind of syncs together. They'll have like, also that'll be based on obviously what my average rate of progress is. And then I'll have to see what I actually want. Going to be 2 times. Because like one time when like how I generally progress. What does that look like across like 2 year time period? Cool. And then each meet will be like an indication. I'm going to do over for 2 years and like finally could do this and where I should kind of be. And also, what would I or what would make me happy? Or is someone going to be that I want to be? What would I need to do to beat them? And also, what's the difference? And with that, kind of know, okay, cool. What things do I need to kind of influence within like this prep to get me close to like that thing, opposed to trying to just like force my way there. So if like I go as I am now, my current like base is this, I'll probably hit here. If I want to elevate to this, I need to like do all the things. So maybe it's like something simple like what's my average sleep like? Is it 6 to 7? Maybe that's my current like what can meal plan is like stuff like that where like I can tweak these things to kind of help me improve, so obviously improve your rate of progress, because that's how I think about as I'm walking. It could just be like, am I doing too much here? Or like, it's the general fatigue I'm having from what I'm doing affecting like overall like fitness or stress. Then being like, oh, I just need to hit this because so and so.
It's a
I don't
realistic
know if that makes
timeline
sense. I'm
too.
just rambling on.
Yeah,
What'd
no,
you
I
say?
mean, it makes it a realistic timeline too. Do you find that you kind of update that pretty often?
Oh
Or,
yeah.
yeah, it's not maybe so. What I started taking some courses on business development and things like that some years back, and they would talk about. I remember this specifically because I'd been running RTS for about 5 years at the time, and they were talking about like setting a 10-year goal, and I'm like, a 10-year goal, like I've only been in business for 5 years. I didn't have any idea. Like I thought this was supposed to be just like a little thing that was going to help finance my travels. Like I didn't know this was going to be a career 5 years ago. Like what makes you think I have any idea what's going to happen in 10 years? This feels
Yeah.
stupid to me to try to project that far, but what I didn't understand at the time is it's not about the specifics. It's about the direction, you know, it's a little bit about the magnitude, but mostly the direction, and as we kind of kept learning this process, I realized like, oh, you never actually get there, like
Oh
you don't
yeah.
even measure against it, from like a business standpoint. It's never like, well, this is 10-year time. Did we meet our 10-year goal? Like that never even happens. Like in a year or two, you throw that old one away and come up with a new one because it's not so important that the specific doesn't matter. It's the direction, a little bit the magnitude. But, and I kind of think of like long-term planning and powerlifting being the same thing. Like mostly we want the direction. And if like getting clear on it helps it to be motivating, then great. But in a year or two, I'm going to throw that one away and come up with a new one anyway.
Like you can obviously have an idea and obviously like based on obviously how you progress in the past, it isn't always like the best increment. You're not always going to progress for that forever. And also like maybe you could progress with better maybe way in doing it right. But if you like the even limited walls, like yourself fight heals the base and that. But I think with it just having those like two like timelines, I kind of have an idea of where I should be heading, and also I can kind of even if I don't hit it, like at least I'm moving forward. And like I think generally like the initial one I had set was like the big one was obviously the Sheffield this year. I'll be back in the state free. And I think at the time the goal was like 920 or something. It was like let's see if I can over the thought. It was like 320, some 220, and like and 920 sounds absolutely insane. Like especially this is like 2023, but it's like the actual big number doesn't really matter. It's more so like how you're gonna get there, and obviously like planning every other needs out. Because like if you add 30-ish kilos to meet, probably will get there. Or it's like if you hit a certain numbers in the training will kind of indicate that. But it's like if you're not super focused on 920, you kind of focus on like so after you plan backwards, like what your next is to be focused on that, it kind of makes it easy to get there. And even if you don't hit 920 or hit 90s, you probably get to 8 something. Like, and that's good enough, really.
Hey, if Ronnie Coleman was a powerlifting coach, he might have said, everybody wants to build custom training programs, but nobody's got a process for how to do it on the regular. But we do. You see, most coaches rely on trial and error, and that's fine if that's your jam, but We wanted a coherent process. Way back in 2015, when I had already been coaching for over a decade, I finally had learned enough from enough sources that I was able to put the pieces together into one coherent process. We call it emerging strategies. The bulk of our 16 world record setting powerlifters set those records using an emerging strategies program. We talk about emerging strategies a ton on this podcast and everywhere. If you ever want a single thorough explanation for how to implement the emerging strategies process, well, that's the emerging strategies course. The emerging strategies course includes 8 modules. That's almost 24 hours of video instruction covering everything. We teach fundamental concepts and basics all the way through integrated examples and case studies. You can watch it at your own pace, as fast or as slow as you want. Oh, and you know the RTS community, our private community that offers you just a stupendous amount of value all on its own? Well, if you enroll in the Emerging Strategies course, you get 6 months of that community membership for free. If you have any questions about some concept, you just post it in the network or jump on a live office hour call with one of our RTS coaches, and you get your answer. If you'd like to enroll or just learn more, to include seeing a full lesson list, all you have to do is go to reactivetrainingsystems.com and click on courses in the main menu. You're gonna love it. Yeah, there's definitely a line to be walked here because I've experienced something very similar where, just having the thing to kind of push you, something to aim at, helps you try harder in training. But sometimes that's not what you need. Sometimes you need to, I guess maybe the best way to describe this is like, I've seen people and been one of the people who writes down, if I want to do, a 920 total at this competition, then I'll need to be able to squat X, bench Y, and deadlift Z. So I need to, only work backwards from there. I need to increase this much every week from now to the competition in order to be on pace. And it goes back to these decision-making processes. And sometimes that causes you to push and try harder and succeed. But sometimes it causes you to push and try harder and blows up in your face. So
you're looking at the 10 kg plate and the 2.5 kg plate, and you're like, there's one that's a good decision and one that's not.
Yeah. It comes back to good decisions, right? Sustainable decisions. Yeah. It's hard for me now. Like, we talk on the team with Ross about this, and Ross is kind of in the stage right now where he's kind of gone away from this mentality a little bit and really more into gone harder in the direction of like, I'm just going to do what I'm capable of today. At least that's the perception that I get from the conversations I've had. I find that sometimes when you really dig into the weeds with somebody, there's other factors here that are influencing the decisions that are maybe we don't verbalize them as much as somebody else would, but they're still important. So anyway, what all I'm trying to get at is like, I don't really know how to tell somebody how to find this balance, but there is a balance that has to be struck there.
I get exactly what I'm trying to find something I wrote down literally about this. People like
it's like forcing a goal versus letting the goal happen due to due process.
It's just it's like it's not fancy. It's like what is that? Basically, it's like when you have like targets and measures, you basically like to get to the goal, you just have to prioritize the measures and targets, which kind of affects the end result. So it's like, for example, like you need for you to hit 920 or 900, you need to hit X amount. So you have like a specific number you need to hit the week before, and obviously you need to hit the blocks. But then you start chasing any numbers to just hit with numbers. Opposed to it's like the numbers are meant to kind of indicate your goal. The numbers, you just hit the numbers. If they're not at the RPE, they don't actually matter. Like if you go and grind out, like it doesn't mean you can do it if you hit the number. So it's like you're probably just better off hitting less. So it's like I think it's what the actual goal is, and staying true to like that, and obviously opposed to like trying to change what the goal is. So like the goal itself is this total or this thing you want. These are meant to kind of indicate you're getting there. The measuring targets aren't the actual goal. They're just kind of to help you get there. So like if you try to make them the goal, you're gonna fall short of what you actually want. Yeah.
Yeah, like when you turn something into a measurement that kind of stops being the ideal measurement at that point.
Yeah. So like obviously I've happened to be in training as well, like where like I'm just now to take this as an example and doing one, even if it's like dog shit ugly and it's like, oh, I've done it, but it's like doesn't mean I can do this. It's just
Yeah, if the goal was X number at 8 RPE and you hit the number, but it was a 10 RPE, it wasn't the goal, it was the indication.
Yeah. Like it doesn't help you.
Do you
But I think
incorporate a
there's
lot
like,
of velocity in your training?
no, something I'm looking into doing. I was actually, I think I asked the question last story, like getting some ideas. I think that was something in rep one, and then it was like Dirk's was the next one. But I was looking at it.
Yeah, man, I think that would be a whole new world that you would be really interested in.
Yeah, like it seems super interesting. Like people, I think they even hit like the last one they ever formula.
Yeah, you know, so something that I think a lot of people won't know is that you came up with some Sheffield predictions that turned out to be really accurate. And I mean that was definitely a moment where I raised an eyebrow, like, wow, that's pretty impressive, you know, to predict actual numbers at a competition with that kind of accuracy. So anyway, I'd bring that up to say I have no doubt that you're going to dig into the velocity side of things. You'll notice the strengths and weaknesses of it and kind of figure this thing out pretty quick. And I'm interested in what you learn along the way.
Where they are the shopping prediction. I actually never posted them, but it was like I think like give it to my handler Jason. He was laughing because he was like I got people obviously got people openers to like extend attempts. Deadlift's thing kind of took a turn on some people, but even if I even had some people like predicted like oh they're gonna fail this, and then seeing like them actually failing was just kind of funny. And then but 2 to 5 off. I think I had him hitting 917, and actually he hit 915, and he needed 917 to play second. And I was laughing at that. And he was like, oh, I had 362. I was like, that's what I had down for 362. And I was laughing so hard. And it was just like, yeah, like opening already to like Jesus third, like having like being off like 2 to 5. I'm super happy, but everyone's gonna enjoy like the aspect of like going from the training, getting like run them down like a pool. What is someone like? What's someone hit in training this year? What does it look like? And then what is like the general rate of progress of this person? And you kind of go, okay, cool. Things not, you know, much people don't like to hear it. Everyone has like a general rate to progress. So like even when people like I'm doing the May 9%, where I'm like, you generally have like a pattern or like unless something's really changed like dramatically, like you're gonna kind of fall in line with this. So it's like I think working on like this move, yeah, so I tend to like obviously look at like what from the base, like what's some actual like average rate of progress, essentially active, make an average. And then from there I can kind of get influenced by what they're actually posting. So like, it allows me to like kind of get very close to what they do. Even with myself, like I even look at myself, so I'm like, oh, I want to hit bars. So like, what do I actually got average do? And like, okay, based on this, do I need to adjust my expectations here?
Oh, that must be humbling in a way.
Yeah, it's super funny. Right? It's like I think on average it's like 8 out of 9 or like 7.6 out of 9. So like typically it's like I'll feel a deadlift, squat rarely, but it's usually deadlift that like 40 kilos on. Just like what my cleans after this lift or like what do I need to hit here? It's something I kind of have to go back on to do because like if I don't do that, I'll be like, you're gonna go hit this today, and I'm like, what? So I have to apply the same logic I think of myself too, so I don't kind of fall prey.
And that's interesting. Well, yeah, I'm doing something similar at the moment. My next competition, my goal is just to PR total. So I'm looking at the last string of competitions. How far is my actual total off from like the ideal perfect day total that you come to competitions with? Is that okay? So if I want to hit a PR total, how much further do I have to go before like how much do I have to push that kind of ideal total up so that a PR is likely, you know. So I'll let you know how it works out in about a month.
Yeah, it's like, do you like make a note of like all your like meets and stuff, and obviously like the targets you had for them, and obviously how far off you are from like the. You have something I like to look. I look at it like obviously having like targeted meets, and then like where you like end up on how far it is, and you like fixate on why it's far off, or it's like it is.
I mean, depends. To me, I think there's like a margin of error that I'm willing to accept, you know. So if we end up, lots of times lifters will end up with like within 2.5 or 5 kilos of their estimated 1RM. And I feel like that's within a reasonable margin of prediction error, right? Especially if we're just basing it off of RPE and we're not using velocity and things like that. It's just variable, and you've got to dial it on the day's performance. But I've had a few people where their performance is off significantly from that E1RM number. And then you kind of treat it like a handicap, you know, like, well, if your actual total is 20 kilos below your estimated total, then, you know, we need to, you know, we can look and see where the numbers are trending, but we need to factor in that performance difference until we prove otherwise. That performance difference is no longer a factor. And that means because sometimes it's down to weight cut or slight differences in performance standards and competition and things like that.
Yeah, like, I get what you mean. Once who talks about Jack Christian. I think with him, like because he thing and done he doesn't do like a dead stop. He like sort of bounces. So obviously the average inflate. He knows like it's going to be super high. So like when he gets mid, he'll adjust for that. And he's like obviously like he can do it because like he knows like what they kind of expect. Obviously telling someone else like your BRM's 20 kilos less than you're going to set at meet day. It's like I mean like translate that based on how you obviously like if we don't pour the benches, expect to drop off from the
I find that I cover a lot of that by just having a good E1RM chart. You get better estimations, better predictions. It's still not perfect, and there's still times where there's just differences between training and competition. You know, a good example is bench pauses. Lots of people don't pause enough in training. I'm one of them, and I can fight that fight, or I can just say, well, the difference is about this much, and we'll factor that in on the competition. You know, so.
it was about I went to how like activity coach. You have like a talk on like the activity training. And it seems to have pretty sure of that. And then I think you mentioned something about then you said it's something from an intense training after I think you mentioned it. It was I think the way you measure stress.
Stress index?
Could be but the actual thing here. I've seen it in an article as well, because you did an article like it was like in a couple years back it was talking about I think it was like I think it came back to a couple of years of like another plateau and then you kind of you adjusted how you kind of approach your training.
Spinal stress?
Could be.
Shear. Spinal shear?
Because you mentioned in a while, Mike, as well.
It sounds like maybe
Index
stress
out.
index might be the thing.
It's somewhat related to stress, but it was like there's a specific thing that you.
Like a tool for measuring training volumes.
Okay, is it acute, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely a thing as well. And
It was like
sorry, I think I cut out there for
seen
a
a chart as
second.
well, right?
Yeah, acute to chronic is definitely a thing. That's something that I've been making more use of lately. Lately, like the last, I don't know, 5 years, I think. Maybe I've written a little bit about it, but not a ton. But to me, like a lot of this stuff builds off of the idea of stress index. Just that, you know, you see this problem with a lot of traditional volume measurements is I don't think they capture what we really care about when we're thinking about training volume. Because you think about training volume and it's like the quantity of work that you're doing, but if you took somebody that was doing sets of 12 let's say you did like 3 sets of 12 at like a 9 RPE versus sets of 3 at a 9 RPE, it's going to take you about like, I think it's like 8 sets of 3 to match the volume load, like even accounting for intensity differences and things like that. It's going to take like 8 sets of 3. Now, nobody would think like 3 sets of 12 at 9 RPE is an equivalent amount of work as 8 sets of 3 at a 9 RPE. Like those are just like 8 sets of 3 at 9 RPE is just way harder than 3 sets of 12, right? But the volume is equivalent. I mean, there's a ton of examples. So where that kind of leads to is number of hard sets, and if you look at hypertrophy research and stuff like that's kind of where that has gone as well, is toward trying to catalog number of hard sets, and that being kind of the operating measurement for volume. The question there is like, what's a hard set? And there's this range of what could be a hard set. It's not like it's a binary where, especially for strength, where like if you're below a 7 RPE, it just doesn't count, because it's not a hard set. So stress index kind of originated with that thought. It's like, well, there's this gradient of how much stimulus are you getting, and also like how much recovery demand do you get from each of these, and trying to model that relationship. We've been through a ton of different versions over the years, but essentially that's what it is. And it's built into all our training logs and block reviews and stuff like that. But where I've gone with it more lately is once you've got like a really good metric for measuring volume, and interestingly enough, it factors into intensity and stuff like that as well, then you can do some things like acute to chronic work ratios that become a lot more powerful. So acute to chronic work ratio is a simple way to think of it is like, how much work have you done this week, and compare that against your baseline. So a common one is, a 1-to-4 ratio. So how much work have I done this week compared to my like rolling 4-week average? The thing is, there's no reason it has to be 4 weeks. It could be longer than that. It could be shorter than that. There's no reason the acute side has to be 1 week. It could be longer than that. It could be shorter than that. And it turns out like there's advantages and disadvantages to all these different time frames, and they can all factor in meaningfully to your decision on like, how much do I do today? So to me, this gets super interesting, and it's like led into this rabbit hole I went down and I'm still down in the bottom of for years now. But to say, every time I get more detailed about how I'm doing load management, my training improves. And generally training for athletes improves too. There's a lot of decisions that have to be made around this, and the psychology doesn't suit everyone, but for those who it's good for, it's been really good.
Okay. I wanted to ask that. I was like, I've seen it like people like let me actually like look into this, because I was like, because that's not something I typically like do. So in terms of like how I kind of look at like my stress or like fatigue and stuff, I can look at what was being put off my all effect like my averaging M3 overall kind of like the part of like kind of things well, and I think sharing like what is the trend kind of like the next growth of you how like if for example like I'm trying to think of example like what I can do with things. So like if by like week 3 of the next block my ERM was low, whichever way it should be. And then I mean, like, maybe I went too hard last night to think it might. But they have an idea of if we're not going too much or not. It's based on this. So like I know if I increase my average intensity by this much last block, but historically it's not as this high. But now this block, I'm underperforming. Maybe I just went too hard. Maybe I need to kind of, if it's like a 7, maybe I need a 6. And that's fine. Even if it's like, I don't get to hit as much of a load, but generally like things will trend better for me, and that's perfectly okay. So that's kind of how I look at it. So I'll fill out on that, because I'll kind of good bits and that. But generally, I think from obviously the top of obviously how these obviously just had a lot more ways you measuring it. Like obviously this was one of him and obviously you think this more idea of like what maybe there's more I could kind of do to make this more systematic or just kind of give me more things to look at opposed to like
Add more data.
yeah, so like and opposed to like having like maybe there's 4 things, like it could be 8. And it's like a cool like just being able to kind of be able to pinpoint things easier.
I don't know if this would be a problem that you'll have or not. But a problem that I had early on, like as I was developing some of this stuff, is I would develop a thing that seemed really cool, and there would be a lot of data coming into it, and the rationale that I had that underpinned it was in the early days not solid enough. And what I found I would do is it would tell me something, right? Like, are running a little bit too hot, your recovery is not good enough, so maybe you need to pull back some of the accessory work for today. And I would look at that and go, I don't believe you. Well, I want to do what I feel like doing anyway. Like it was not, there wasn't enough underneath the hood for me to fully trust it when it told me something I didn't want to hear.
Okay.
So it took a long time for me to get to the point where, like, okay, this is solid. And even if it tells me something I don't want to hear, I know why, and I know that's probably the smart move. And I may still decide not to do it, but it won't be because, I'm convinced that something else is better. It's that, I have chosen to take a risk that, is not like built into the system, right? It took a long time to get there, but like to me, having the nuts and bolts under the hood strong enough to, like, even when it tells me something I don't want to hear, like on Wednesday this week, my recommendation was for me to skip my bench work. I know why, and it has to do with the ways that I adapted things earlier on in the week and things like that. But in order for me to listen, I have to believe in it. And that was definitely a process to get to that point.
Okay, so like they have to buy into like what you're kind of putting down.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I know what you mean. With I think obviously tracking obviously certain data points, like it was kind of nice to have them there. So I wouldn't really like use them until things kind of didn't go the way I had. Then I had to start trying to like actually look at what this is telling you, like implement it in some way. And I think obviously before I start adding some new stuff in now, I need to obviously make sure that why I'm adding it in, there's a reason for it, like a solid reason. There's like if it tells me something I will.
Yeah.
It's kind of the tracking of what things has led to the argument that I shouldn't go forward with work. And you need to have a bit of a tracked argument that your system that you're relying on is telling you to do or not to do something.
Yeah. I don't think I would have a hard time listening to like a black box AI system. I think, like it's just like, based on patterns, these vague patterns, you should take an extra rest day. And I'm going to go, no, I'm not doing that.
I think because like you kind of have to have. I know what you mean because like if it's like a black box, you don't kind of know why it's suggesting. You haven't got an idea why it's suggesting it or like what it's
Right.
drawing it like intention. You kind of know okay, cool, why you should kind of do it or listen. But if you don't, it just even if it's right and it tells you what into it.
Yeah. The buy-in is still important even for self-coached people, which is interesting, right? Like
I think it's more so because you own all the in process. The ownership of all the decision making is technically your own. And so you want to be the best decision maker for your training. So if someone's telling you to do something or do something, and if you're not part of that process of decision making, you're like, well, the answer isn't telling me how to be a better self-coach.
Well, I wonder if that's maybe part of the problem, right? For like people find self-coaching to be really difficult. And a lot of it has to do with those emotions that, you feel like, I feel good. I want to go heavy today. Why should I not go heavy today when I feel good? I feel like trash today. I just want to sleep. So why should I not do the thing that I just feel like doing? And then, like, not only do you feel a certain way, especially once you get a bit of knowledge, you can make an argument that, at least to yourself, sounds convincing, So that's kind of why I keep coming back to this litmus test of like, can it tell me to do something that I don't want to do? And I know that's for the best, Um, that's kind of how I've been thinking of it.
I think like what kind of helps me kind of with like obviously making turbine switching and stuff was like I'm writing things down why I've done something. So like even if like this was another thing, I get a little anxious when I want to change things, especially when something works, but I think something could work better. And like when I want to change it, like I'll write like why I think it's gonna work, or have like a note down, and like even if it doesn't go tits up or it goes well, at least I can say I was doing it for this reason than just like throwing something in there because I've seen something. Like because like there's always like it's easier when things haven't gone well, but it's harder when things have gone well and you're like, but this could be better. And it's like, how do I then navigate like, let's say you're getting like each pack again makes 10 kilos, but what you set for you and still be like relatively healthy. But it's like, I want to change this one. Or 10's good. So you got so I just make sure like I write some notes down like that's the why I'm making the change. So it doesn't.
Do you ever go back and I'm asking this because I used to do something similar. Do you ever go back and look at those and be like, that was a stupid reason to change it? I definitely did that more than a few occasions, but
This is another thing you learn like it's like because sometimes like the result you get is not why you think it's happening. So you might like draw some assumptions in that, and it's not actually why it's happening.
yeah,
You make it based on like an assumption you had without like fully thinking it through, and then once you like, but I think this is why it helps like you make a note of like what you've done. At least like even if it's like for that thing you kind of know, okay, cool, this is why I kind of thought that, and it guys like, oh, just went off for a second. Or it's like let's say they didn't do as heavy as we wanted, and they got to meet day, and it's like it's in a flat, and it's like why you think you're flat is not why you actually didn't go that way. It's like if you look at like what their last couple blocks has been, it's like these RP10 the last two blocks. You're going into this block with a lot of fatigue. Just because you didn't fit this certain amount of load before you meet the knee, you can't do that on the different circumstances. So it's like thinking accurate something and people like full assumptions based on like things like that. Or it's like, oh, I don't really or it's like something like let's say I felt really strong on this week before. Is it because I benched like the day before? Maybe you maybe just it could so the whole block you will not be in there. But just because of circumstances you have to do this time, you still ended up with the result you wanted. Like it doesn't then mean like you now have to change everything else because of this one day. It's like you're drawing like this is like one data point. And it's like you have all these lists questions tell you this. Yeah, I think it's like I think it helps with like to write like why you use something. So like you can kind of look back and go to yeah, this makes sense. Yeah, what you're trying to do. I did that with the deadlift. Helped quite a bit with like the navigating like yeah, like I think it's coming back from approach like you can do. Like certainly like this is my second day to actually fly. My approach is mostly like around there. I'm in 2 days, 2 o'clock right here. And obviously kind of pull away back from that of like, I don't have two types of builds. I've only done this like the last 50 years, more stronger. It's not really working like so much for me now. But it's like I've done this like this fall back. It's like after people have gotten strong without doing any of this. People have gotten strong just one volume in their face and just tapering off on move pumps to truly. So it's like you can get strong from loads of different approaches. And it's kind of like rally stuff. So it's like the first to use keep up to date. One day where I just like it's like a cool. After a couple sets, same load, just to manage it. Let's try out. Push one day, this day like let's try it out. Worst case, that's a bad block. And I don't think it's expected, but it can't be any worse than getting injured. It's like can't be any worse than this. And then just kind of like through maybe and then just kind of adjusting it and like it didn't go so well, I'll just make that be flat. What does that do? And then yeah, it kind of worked itself out. But then like they're being like stuff for no reasons. Like just not wanting to carry from what you've always been doing. I feel like I do see flat if you get rid of it a lot.
Yeah,
Like,
something that served you in the past might not always serve you. You need to learn when to let it go.
Yeah, those things definitely change over time. Do you have a review process that you go through? Like, I know we talk about our block review process where we kind of systematize it. Do you do something like that, or do you just kind of, you're making those observations as you go in a more fluid way?
or like, so with meat clock, I have like general targets like each day, and then I'll have that out like in a separate like sheet where so if I want to be roughly for, and then I obviously know how I've done each series of practice, and then at the same point, and then obviously end of the block I kind of make to keep how close is that to these target, and obviously what would the FD, and then generate like even though I hit the number, sitting it the chest if like she off by the RP and obviously an overall like how I'm feeling too. So that's kind of looks to see what I did when that abnormal, like did a day feel really bad compared to what I was expecting, did a day feel really good. When I kind of know, okay, cool, like whether I'm in the right direction or I'm changing things for forward. So yeah, it's pretty like simple really. It's just kind of what on the back is like the Reynolds hat. Yeah, I've got.
Yeah, that makes sense. Ade, man, thanks for your time. Definitely enjoyed talking to you, man. It's always good to compare notes, and I'm interested to have another chat with you after you've played with some VBT stuff.
I'll let you know, obviously, how it goes.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, great.
Hey, let me tell you something that I know about you. Your lifting is important to you. It's probably one of your biggest priorities. And for people like us, nothing compares to the feeling that you get when you set a new PR. That feeling of being the best that you've ever been, of doing something that you've never done before. This is what we're all after, and it's also what RTS specializes in. Getting you the absolute best program possible so that you can hit new PRs and reach your goals. We call it radically individualized training, and we're really good at it. Whether we need to account for busy schedules or equipment limitations, or precisely turn the dials and get the details of the program just right, we have the tools and the experience to guide your lifting to the next level. To us, coaching is all about leadership, relationship, and creative problem solving. A coach should be poised to help you make tough decisions about training and competing so that you can continually grow in your development. And of course, a coach should be a first-rate problem solver, especially when it comes to your training, technique, and strategy. Now, all this has to be built off of a really strong, professional coaching relationship that emphasizes trust and respect. Additionally, RTS coaches are not on an island. We have a strong network of professionals to reach out to, so if you find yourself in need of some specific expertise, say in the realm of nutrition or injury management or sports psychology, there's a deep expertise available there too. For more information, go to store.reactivetrainingsystems.com and click on coaching. That's store.reactivetrainingsystems.com, then click on coaching. Hope to see you on the team soon.